I always told myself that I would never leave this zip code. I can't explain how blessed I am and how honored I am to be chosen to carry on this legacy. I don't ever want to do anything that Caroline wouldn't want done, and anytime I think of an event or a decision I have to make, I say, what would Caroline do? That's my motto.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 129, The Dormon Legacy, a good conversation featuring Bayli Brossette, Curator at Briarwood Nature Preserve in Saline, Louisiana. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. One evening, several decades ago, I and a group of my dear friends took a camping trip to North Louisiana. That evening, as we were lost in the dense display of stars dusting the sky, the group was suddenly jolted by the sound of a vehicle backfire as it rumbled along Highway 117. One of my friends wondered aloud, I'd be curious if there were any place left in Louisiana where you can truly escape the sound of a combustion engine. The comment brought a silence to our group and was impactful enough that it still emerges in my thoughts as I enter the youth of my old age. In this episode of Find the Good News, I once again traveled through North Louisiana's piney woods and hills, not to camp with friends, but to visit with Bayli Brossette, the Curator of Briarwood Nature Preserve. Ahead of my trip, Bayli advised that I fuel up as the nearest resources were over 45 miles away. While this was sound advice, I couldn't help but wonder again, how far do you need to go to get away from the sound of engines? I would soon discover that not only does such a place exist in Louisiana, it's also connected to that Kisatchie National Forest campsite where my friend had posed the original query. Upon entering Briarwood Nature Preserve in Saline, Louisiana, it is immediately apparent that you're wading into a historic space of conservation and love. Briarwood Nature Preserve is the living legacy of ornithologist, activist, writer, painter, teacher, and advocate Caroline Dormon. The pace immediately slowed down as I left the highway and passed the historic marker dedicated to Caroline Dormon. About halfway through the winding entrance road, I stopped and stood in this new space, full of cascading shades of green, enveloped by waves of insect chatter and birdsong. Further still, I was greeted by the Briarwood sign, which seemed as though it had always been there. And it was then I wondered how many others had made this trip, what their expectations were upon arrival, and how the space might have changed them as they left. Would I have that type of experience? At their home within the preserve, Bayli and her husband Travis greeted us with a gentle hospitality and warmth that carried us deep into a lovely and informative conversation. I found the space and the visit invigorating while at the same time absolutely comforting. Like light through an emerald canopy, Bayli shared her path to becoming Briarwood's curator, what the work entails, the rich history of Briarwood Nature Preserve, and the almost unbelievable accomplishments of Caroline Dormon, whose life and efforts have meant so much to so many, even if her name might seem somewhat obscure to most. After our conversation, Bayli and Travis shared even more of their time and offered a tour of many key spaces on the protected acreage, such as Grandpappy, the nearly 500-year-old longleaf pine favored by Dormon, the statue of Caroline located at the site of her childhood home, as well as a quiet and truly touching visit to Caroline Dormon's cabin, the space where she lived, wrote, and painted. My day in this green cloud that is Briarwood Nature Preserve was an absolute joy, and Bayli was an informative, thoughtful, and wonderful host. There is iron in Caroline Dormon's legacy, and there is no doubt in my mind that the right people are in place to preserve and present that legacy to the next generation of travelers and seekers. So, through my conversation with Bayli Brossette, I invite you to Briarwood Nature Preserve, where the sounds of combustion engines are quelled by lush acres of whispering pines and wildflowers. Now, let's cue the music and press play on a little good news.
Wake up, it's morning, dreaming up the story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep. On the path to your deliverance, in a holy ball of light, pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news, Sometimes you want to shut those channels down and seek a better source. With Find the Good News, I tune into good people doing good works wherever I can find them. I scan the signals looking for educators and students, scientists and spiritual leaders, writers, musicians and artists, business owners, volunteers, and active citizens who offer their time, resources, and talents to build a better world for others. In each episode, I tune into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. I uncover the critical life experiences that shape them, the principles that guide them, and the foundational philosophies that keep them on their path of goodness. There's a lot of news, and it's a noisy world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm cutting through the static to find the good.
I love you just as well.
I've never been here before. It's kind of like a hidden gem. We were on our way up here, and I started noticing wildflowers on the side of the road, and I really didn't see them until we got close, and I thought, okay, we must be getting close, surely. And then as we turn where the sign's at, I saw the same flowers, and I'm going, okay, well, maybe some of these things that are preserved here are actually some of the seeds blowing out onto the highway a little bit. So, Bayli, I got to tell you, when we pulled in, I told my son, I said, this is the life right here. I mean, I'm just fascinated to hear about how you came to be the curator. Am I saying that correct? Mm-hmm. Curator, that's the title. And what day-to-day life is like here, what the mission is, and then the history of Briarwood Nature Preserve.
Okay. I grew up in Chestnut, which is 20 minutes through the woods from here.
Okay. Which direction?
South.
South, okay.
East, west, I don't know.
Yeah, but you're a home girl. This is where you grew up around here.
Yep. Like my dad's mother's side of the family's from Saline. Like I'm kin to everyone here, pretty much.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Anyway, I grew up as an only child, so the only thing I had to do growing up was be in the woods.
Okay.
And I just adopted this love for trees and wildlife. And I went to high school in Campty.
Okay.
And when I was in high school, I joined the National FFA organization, which is intracurricular with agriculture education. And through high school, I got to travel across the country and even to South Africa with FFA, studying horticulture and forestry. And I just loved it. I always had a passion for forestry and the woods. But something just changed my mind when it was time to apply for college. And I wanted to go to Louisiana Tech for forestry, but my dad had Parkinson's, so I stayed home with him, and I went to Northwestern, and I have a bachelor's of criminal justice.
Okay.
And anytime I tell people that, since I've been in the Curator, like, why are you here? How do you have a criminal justice degree and you're at Briarwood? And I always say, Caroline Dormon had a literature degree, so...
You don't know. Yeah, you never know what's going to draw you to a place or a path.
Mm-hmm. And the semester I graduated, the previous curator, Rick Johnson, announced his retirement. And me and Travis were trying to figure out what we were going to do, like when we were going to move in together. And I saw this job posting. And I was like, this sounds like the dream job. So I applied. I didn't think I'd get it because I have a degree in criminal justice, but I have a passion for this. I didn't have a passion for being in law enforcement. So I applied, and here we are.
And that was how many years ago was this?
That was, we moved in December of 21.
Oh, okay.
So nearly 3 years.
Wow.
I still feel like a rookie, though. I'm still learning. But it's not even a job. I mean, this is just a dream.
Yeah. That's interesting. So now I'm really curious. So criminal justice... Do you find that any of that plays into the job, though? Like, have you ever went, oh, some of this thinking is valuable in this job of curating a nature preserve? Or is it just your passion that drives you and your interests?
I can't think of anything that really relates to being in criminal justice to being at Briarwood, other than when I was in college, I also took anthropology and social science. And that's played in a lot with being around people of all sorts of backgrounds and traveling across the state, meeting all sorts of people. That's helped a lot. But as far as learning about the laws,
Yeah, I understand. It's interesting. We were talking about this driving in. We drove in really slow and we stopped and took a bunch of pictures. And I was like, you really, for some people, it would be a massive adjustment to one, as you warned us drive before we came up here, you were like, make sure you have gas up and, the gas isn't just one thing you have to worry about. You really start to think about, okay, all of your resources that you have to make sure you have, because it is a bit of a trek. But then also, so many of us are used to just being around people. Like for me, for instance, me, I live on a drive. It's not really like a neighborhood necessarily, but I have neighbors. I see them every day. I don't talk to them every day and don't have personal relationships with them every day, but they're there every day. They exist. You see them all the time. I imagine that it's probably not exactly the same out here.
Mm-mm. No, like we have neighbors pretty close by that we see, maybe once a week. But other than that, I can go a whole week without leaving this place.
Wow.
But I grew up always living 45 minutes from a Walmart.
Right.
30 minutes from the gas station. Like it's been normal for me my whole life. And when I got to college and I started meeting people from bigger towns, and they were just always shocked that, I can't believe you live almost 2 hours from a Target. Like, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So okay, that makes sense. So this wasn't that big of a leap, right? And you were already familiar with this area growing up. Did you come to Briarwood when you were
when I was a kid with my grandfather? Okay. But throughout high school, junior high, I never came out, or in college.
So what was your knowledge base of it then? I'm always curious because sometimes in life we're like around something, or it's just sort of osmosis almost. We just pick it up and we don't really put our mind on it, but then you put your mind on it and it becomes your life, and then you're like, wow, this was always here. I had like a real skim level awareness of it. Was that kind of what it was like?
And when I talk to people in the community today, they've lived here their entire lives and have never came to Briarwood, and I don't think any differently of them because I was the same way. But my grandmother knew Caroline.
Oh, wow. Personal relation. Okay.
And so did my great uncle. My grandmother had irises from Caroline, and my great uncle Jackie, who's really the reason I got into FFA when I was in high school. He learned a lot from Caroline and spent a lot of time out here at Briarwood. But ever since I've been at Briarwood, I've found all these hidden connections to Caroline and Richard Johnson, who was the original curator. So I've been doing genealogy since, 2010. That's been the longest hobby I've ever had. And when I first met Richard Johnson, he told me we were related. We were third cousins or something. And I was like, how does he know this? He laid it all out, the entire family lineage. He knew how my grandparents met. He knew this, that. I've never met this man in my life. And so I made my own family tree to find him in it. And then we share a great-grandfather. It would be like his third great-grandfather, but like my seventh great-grandfather. And that great-grandfather was from Barnwell County, South Carolina, and moved to Sparta, Louisiana before the Civil War, which is what this area was called. Right before the Civil War, Caroline's grandparents also moved to Sparta, Louisiana.
Okay.
So there's no record if they knew each other, but it's out of anywhere in the world, they came from the same town and moved to the same town.
Yeah, it's a crossover node there for sure.
Yeah.
So Sparta, I saw while driving in, there's a sign that says Sparta Trail. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so that was the old road up to Sparta. So initially, when Bienville Parish was formed, that was the parish seat, Sparta. It doesn't exist anymore. Some people say that their address says Sparta, but it's not a town.
Okay, yeah.
The parish seat is now, I believe, Arcadia, or the town of Bienville.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm actually, that's a good point. I'd like to actually talk about that for a second. So exactly, if you have some landmarks, so for the listener who may be familiar with Louisiana, where exactly are we in Louisiana right now?
So Saline is located on Highway 9. We are 45 minutes north of Natchitoches and 45 minutes south of Ruston.
Okay.
So we're right in the middle of both of those towns.
Gotcha. And it's kind of hidden. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, you could drive right by. You know, I stopped and took a picture of the sign, and I was like, I wonder if I wasn't looking for it, would I have really known that this was back here?
No.
But I will say, when I got out, the first thing I noticed was birdsong, just immediately. I was like, okay, so it's a preserve. There's definitely already, when you just come into that liminal space, right, from the road, you get the impression that things have changed as you've went through a wall of some sort.
Yep.
Is that what it feels like living out here?
Yeah, it's like its own little bubble. I mean, Briarwood, like I said, I grew up 20 minutes from here. I've seen birds here at Briarwood that I've never seen in my life.
Like what's a bird you've seen?
An indigo bunting. It's like a turquoise color. I never saw those.
I've never seen one in actual. I've seen pictures, but I've never seen one.
And summer tanager.
I've never seen one of those either.
We have those. I think we've recorded over or close to 300 different species of birds at Briarwood.
300, wow.
Over time.
What does that feel like? My youngest son and I we're kind of birders, and we go out to the pasture lands early in the mornings, hoping to see something special. But we have an app. I can't remember what it's called, but it'll hear them and then it'll tell you what you're hearing. And we hear things all the time, but we don't see them, and we get so, I guess, frustrated is the right word. We're like, where is it? Like we know that's what it is, but we just can't see it. Does that happen out here?
Yeah, but I think you're talking about the Merlin bird app.
Merlin, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I use that pretty often. But one day it told me there were turkeys. I could not find turkeys anywhere.
That is interesting. So now I'm really going to jump all over the place, so forgive me, but my brain's firing off. So do they need to make an appointment to come out here if they want to bird watch and do something like that? Or what is that like for the person that doesn't know? Because this is my first time too coming out.
So since Briarwood opened in 72 to the public, they were always open on the weekends, and you could just drive in. But this year we changed our hours to be by appointment 12 months out of the year.
Okay.
So anyone can come anytime just by appointment. They can go on our website and schedule an appointment, or email, or call, message us on Facebook.
I see, okay.
But I wanted to change our hours to be open 12 months out of the year, specifically for people who wanted to come out in the winter or in the middle of the summer.
Okay.
Like winter is a perfect time to see the birds eating like winter berries, and it's beautiful. And in the summer, our wildflower meadow is just spectacular, and I think people have missed out on that a lot in the past. So offering appointments that time of the year, if anyone wants to come, has helped tremendously.
So how does that work? I mean, they say they go online, they make an appointment. Do they come and they have a check-in spot, or how does that work exactly? Like, what's the logistics of that?
Yeah, so Briarwood is a very personal place. I'm the one that handles all the social media appointments, all that good stuff. So they make their appointment online, typically text them and ask how many people, and I remind them about the gas. Get gas if you're coming whatever direction. And I meet them at the visitor center.
Okay.
And they have the choice to hike or ride the golf cart.
Oh, okay.
So whatever they want to do, then we ride around the whole property. The tours are typically an hour and a half.
I see.
Sometimes it runs a little bit longer because I'll get to talking and I talk.
Well, that's good though. I mean, because that was kind of what my question was, is what that experience would be like. If you're coming out here, you're just coming out and wandering on your own. But if they've got you, it's like, I can imagine that's probably a lot of fun, because you're pointing things out to people along the way, because it's so easy in the green. I guess it's like the green cloud, you come out into a nature preserve and it's like green, 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 green. And then the color stands out, right? I mean, and you may want to focus on that as an observer. It's like, oh, what's that? I see it. It's yellow. Oh, that's pink. It's white. But, there's a beauty in all that variety of green too, right? If you really get down on and belly crawl and look at it really close, I'm sure you see
a lot of diversity. What is somebody going to be exposed to in Briarwood that's in that green cloud, so to speak, you know?
So Briarwood is a pretty unique landscape. So most of the property here is just natural. We have a few older trees that are part of the old growth forest, virgin timber. We also have a collection of plants that are native to the entire southeastern United States. So there are some things at Briarwood that don't exist anywhere else in Louisiana.
Okay, I heard that.
Caroline wanted to preserve native plants from anywhere from Texas all the way to the Carolinas, and she would go on these road trips. Our people would trade plants with her. So we have, for example, we have a Florida torreya. That is the most critically endangered conifer in the world.
Really?
And we have one. And to my knowledge, it's the only one in Louisiana. I know of one at the Biltmore Estate, and but they're native to Apalachicola, Florida, and they only have a native range of about 120 miles. But Caroline collected cuttings, I think in the 30s, and brought them back, and they thrived. 3 of them thrived. We only have 1 left, but we have babies.
Mm-hmm.
We have little ones.
Sure.
But it's just, you never know what you're going to see. I still see stuff I've never seen before, and I've been here almost 3 years. So when we do tours, I like to do the tours specifically so I could show these people things they may miss. And also because I want to do things as close to what Caroline did, and she wouldn't have let people just wander. Because if they picked a flower of hers, she would throw a fit. And
Yeah.
I don't want that. I've had a lady come out and try to pick a bouquet out of the wildflower meadow. Her tour was cut immediately.
Don't pick the flowers at Briarwood. I got you, yeah.
Because it might be a rare flower, and we
Sure.
may be collecting those seeds later, and that might be the only one. So if you pick that flower, then what's going to happen? It's gone.
That makes sense. You know, years ago, when I don't remember where we were at, but I mean, I was very ignorant and young, didn't realize the value. But I was hiking somewhere and had picked up a big pine cone, and I was like, "This is so cool! I'm gonna bring it home." And I was walking out with it, and a park ranger made me drop it, and I was like, what? I was like, what is going on? But it, you know, immature, didn't understand why, you know. And later, as I guess grew up a little bit, I was like, okay, I understand. I mean, it's important. You can't just go grab anything out of a protected area and just take it home.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's a protected area. I mean, that's funny because, you know, that's a small thing, but it's like it kind of scales up, you know, why it's important to protect the big things too. I guess that's something that perhaps not every audience member is going to understand, and I don't even know if I fully understand it. This is a nature preserve, correct? So what is, I mean, just in layman's term, what does that mean exactly? I mean, I get the word preservation, it's protected, but how does that actually work?
So Briarwood is very unique. People think that we're a state park, or we're not. When Caroline Dormon, just before she died in November of 1971, she actually on her deathbed, she asked for 2 people to come, and that was Miss Sudie Lawton from Natchitoches and Mr. Richard Johnson from here in Saline. And she asked Sudie to take care of this foundation Caroline was going to create, and it's the foundation for the preservation of the Caroline Dormon Nature Preserve. And she asked Mr. Richard to take care of the property. Mr. Richard had been working for her since he was 6 years old, and he was born in 1928, I think, or 29.
Wow.
So Caroline was like another mother to Richard. At any rate, she passed away, and they created this foundation as a nonprofit organization and opened a trust. And we're still a nonprofit, but we're privately owned by the foundation.
I see.
So we rely solely on tour fees, merchandise sales. We have plant sales, and we have events throughout the year.
It's not a state-funded nature
No.
preserve. Okay.
Yeah, we're not federally funded or anything. We're just private.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. That helps me understand.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's funny, and this is probably going to sound really ignorant, but I didn't even really realize that that's how that worked until I watched a film, I think it's called The Master Gardener. and the main character in this film worked on well, I guess it was like a nature preserve. It was like a big garden property, acres and acres, that he and a team of others maintained, and kept the gardens. People could come, but it was privately owned by a family and funded by a family. And it was like sort of passed from one generation to the next. So I guess in a way it kind of reminds me of what you're describing. It's not something where you have federal or state kind of. That's interesting. Okay. So I didn't really understand that either. You hear, and that's good that you pointed out that it's not a park or something like that, because I do think there probably could be a misconception. I mean, if people don't understand, it's like, oh, I can just drive in and it's like a state park and, there's benches and picnic tables and places to camp.
Yeah. And going back to our tours, go and saying that they're personable, no tour is the same. I mean, you never know what you're going to see. I don't have a speech memorized that I recite every single time. I try to get to know the people that I'm giving a tour to, maybe to try to find some things that they may relate to that we have, or even about Caroline. So I'm not a professional tour guide.
Well, that's really kind of a beautiful thing, though. I mean, and it's really nice to hear, somebody like me. I mean, I would probably get a different tour because I might be really interested in birds or something like that. And then if I start talking about birds, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, you're going to flow with that guest, right? That's really interesting. Or somebody who's maybe just particularly has an interest in trees or flowers. I like that.
And I've had visitors who just came to learn more about Caroline. And, I take them to her cabin and they just spend a lot of time in there. Or at Grandpappy, which is Caroline's longleaf pine.
Wait, it's a particular pine named Grandpappy?
Yep. He's a longleaf pine, estimated to be somewhere between 400 and 500 years old.
Wow.
Very old tree, but that was her tree.
That was her tree.
Yep. And there's a famous picture of Caroline leaned up against a tree.
I've seen that.
That's Grandpappy.
That's Grandpappy.
Yeah. So I'll have visitors come out and take a picture just like that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. I didn't realize it had a name.
Need a brand boost? Parker Brand Creative Services is your go-to team. From graphic design to video production, we craft your vision with precision. Visit parkerbrandup.com and let's build a great brand together.
So, okay, for the listener, you've heard Caroline, you've heard Caroline Dormon as we've been talking. So who is Caroline Dormon? Big question.
Yeah, I could talk about her all day long. I'll just say she's probably one of the most influential people that ever came out of Louisiana, but a lot of people have no idea who she was or who she is. We didn't learn about her in school. She's not taught about. But one of the most important things she ever did was create the Kisatchie National Forest. It took her 10 years to finally convince them to establish it. And by that time, majority of all the virgin longleaf pines were gone. And she wanted to establish it to protect those pines. And she was a Louisiana iris hybridizer. She's the reason that Louisiana irises became so popular in the horticulture world. She was an ornithologist, she was an author, a painter, and she worked closely with Native American tribes, the Caddo, Choctaw, Chitimacha, and she learned their craft. Like, she learned how to weave baskets with pine needles, and if you come for a tour, you'll see those in her cabin. Also, really? She wrote books about Native Americans and a lot of articles. She gave a lot of speeches about Native Americans, and she's established the first conservation education program in Louisiana. She was also a teacher for a few years. She did a lot.
Wow.
She died when she was 83 years old, and she lived at least 10 people's lifetimes.
That's really interesting. I didn't know a lot of that, honestly. Actually, to be fair, I really didn't know that she established Kisatchie National Forest. No, I mean, yeah, I kind of feel silly not, because we've spent a lot of time in earlier pre-recording, you were talking about, was it the Red Dirt area? Yeah, we spent a lot of time there when I was in high school and then past there. I've always enjoyed that area. But I guess I just never scratched through the paint to find out who established Kisatchie National Forest.
So, she went to college at the Judson School in Marion, Alabama. It was an all-women's school, and she got a degree in literature and art, and came back home and taught. I think the first school she taught at was in Lake Arthur, and then she wanted to be moved back to the woods. So they put her at the Kisatchie School in the town or place of Kisatchie, and she taught there, and she never spent time down there. And all of her free time, she was wandering down the creeks and the roads down there and seeing these magnificent, massive longleaf pines. And she said, this needs to be a national park.
Huh.
That was in 1920 when she had this idea.
Okay.
And by 1925 or 26, at least 50% of all those longleaf pines were cut. And by 1927, I want to say, she was still fighting to try and get a law passed that I think at Louisiana to buy this land to be public land.
Okay.
But eventually, in 1930, it was finally established as a national forest. And at that time, there was hardly any virgin timber left. And that's how we got the Kisatchie National Forest.
That's interesting to me. I mean, I love hearing stuff like that, and I like hearing something I didn't know that I just took for granted, to be honest with you. And I know I use the word ignorant on this show all the time when I'm talking about myself. I don't think it's bad to be ignorant. I think it's nice to discover when you are, because that's the moment when you should say, tell me more, I don't know. And I mean, yeah, learning something new like that, it makes me think back to going through Kisatchie, different trails, hiking, camping, what have you, and taking it for granted. It's like that, you know how I had a V8 moment when you go, look at what it really took. I have no idea what it takes to establish a national forest. I have no idea what that even looks like, to walk through a place and go, this is special, someone ought to preserve it, and I'm going to do it. Like, that's what she did. Like, that's kind of like this monumental thing that I can't even comprehend.
And it is even more spectacular that she was able to accomplish that. But it was even more spectacular that she was a woman in the 20s.
Yeah.
Didn't even have the legal right to vote yet.
That's unreal.
And she was traveling across the country lobbying to have this national forest established.
Yeah. That the hurdles and the adversity. Yeah, we talk about that so often on this show, like overcoming adversity. That is amazing. I just think that's a steely thing, you know. There's like one of my favorite movies is Outlaw Josie Wells, and there's this conversation where it's just him and an Indian, and he says there's iron in our words. And I remember I kind of tear up when I watch that scene, because I'm like, gosh, that's something that moves me, because I think it matters so much. We're so wound up in saying so much stuff and just kind of chatter online constantly, and it's like, what's it like to actually have iron in your actions and iron in your words? I'm like, yeah, I love it when I meet people like that or hear about people like that, and just has a feeling to it, like, wow, they're going to get something done. Carolyn sounds like there was iron in her life, iron in her words.
Yeah.
I love that. And so this is just leading right into one of my big questions. You know, and I believe your husband and I were talking about this earlier, is legacy and being a part of a continued legacy. You know, many of us in the world, our legacy might just be a family legacy, which isn't to belittle that or make it small. It can be a big thing. But, you know, for me, legacy is just, what do I remember about my grandmother? What do I remember about my grandfather, my father, my mother? If you don't have those people with you anymore, you have sort of like these little eggs, is what I kind of think of, like little containers of the good things that really stuck. And it's like, okay, now I've got to take that, make a new egg, hand that off to my kids.
Yeah.
But what you guys are a part of is not just a family legacy. It's another human being's legacy and a property So it's a big egg. So what is that like?
It's the most wonderful and most scary thing that I've ever done in my life.
Scary, why?
I don't want to mess anything up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I never want to do anything that Caroline wouldn't want done.
Does that give you strength, the fear, though?
Yeah. 'Cause,
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time reading letters and notes that she wrote or talking to people that are still alive that did have the privilege to spend time with her. And I feel like I know her at this point, and I know what she would want. But I don't know. I can't put into words how honored am to be here. And like I said earlier, I spent, better half of my life doing genealogy because I like learning about my family and how I can carry on legacy of my family. Like, if I stayed in law enforcement, I'd be third generation law enforcement. That just wasn't my passion. But learning about like generations and generations of blacksmiths and different things in my life, it's really important to me. And collecting items from like my grandparents or my great grandparents. And I always told myself that I would never leave this zip code. It's 71070. My life goal was to never leave Saline, or Chestnut, same zip code, but whatever.
Yeah.
And just being here, I can't explain how blessed I am, and how honored I am to be chosen to carry on this legacy. But yeah, like I said, I don't ever want to do anything that Caroline wouldn't want done. And anytime I think of an event or a decision I have to make, I say, what would Caroline do? That's my motto.
I love that. God, I got so many things just firing off. I mean, I hope like I can remember, because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, gosh, you're able to be a part of so many ideas that I find to be of value. One is, when somebody's gone. Boy, I'm gonna have to be careful here because I don't want to get off too far in the weeds, but it's something that is important to me. So maybe it'll be important to you. I'll just put it out there and be open. Like, my ancestors are all gone. My parents are gone. My grandparents are gone. I don't have anybody that I can talk to. I can't go to my dad and say, hey, look at my life. Am I doing a good job? Does this honor you properly? I can't do that with my mother, my grandmother, none of those people. And then my children don't get to experience those people. They can't. All I can do is tell them stories. But one idea, and it really comes from a Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, was that we live, the people, our ancestors actually live through us. They actually do. It's not just an idea that they do, but if your mother taught you how to season a cast iron skillet, as my mother taught me, when I season her cast iron skillet and clean it properly and then cook a meal for my children in that skillet, they may just be thinking they're eating a meal, but they're actually eating a meal prepared by my mother, because my mother is also in me. So she is alive in a way. Like when I pick garlic that my grandmother handed me, that was her father's garlic bulb, and I'm still picking that garlic bulb, my grandmother is alive, and so is my great grandfather. And so even though it's not fully them, I really kind of am them, but then I'm also those other people that got blended into me. And so that's a big idea. And I guess in a way, what I'm getting at, and when I'm listening to you talk about all this, I'm thinking, wow, Carolyn Dormon is sort of this place now. And then in a way, she's also you continued. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm getting really weird here, or is that?
No, I hear you. Because Caroline never got married or had children. And
well, perfect example.
That's I think that's how she had so much time to do everything she did.
That's probably true.
But like, Briarwood was her child, I guess. I mean, even though her grandparents settled this property, she made it what it is. And I think while you're talking about like the cast iron skillet, I was thinking about our bay garden, which is probably the most historic collection of Louisiana irises in the world. Those were her babies.
Yeah.
And being out there and digging them up and replanting them, thinking, Caroline Dormon planted these, over 100 years ago.
That's something.
And it's just, I don't want to get like emotional or anything, but going back to your conversation, back in 2011, we had a massive forest fire in northern Natchez Parish, and we lost our house. And the property was settled by my 6th great-grandfather. So we had pictures, clothes, you name it. We had it from multiple generations, and we total loss. Don't have anything. So it was kind of like I had a clean slate coming over here, even though that was still 10 years prior. And now it's like Caroline and Richard and his wife Jessie and Rick, those were the 3 previous curators. That's like my previous family. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is my home now, like it was their home.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is the interesting thing about a human animal to me versus anything else. I mean, we have a lot of flaws, but our creature can consider those things. Like the things you lost in that fire. I mean, now since those, we put value in objects. I do. And when I came in here, I saw the flag, in the triangle shape. And I immediately asked, because I have a flag in my office. My son has my grandfather's flag. I have my father's. And immediately I go, there's a person attached to that object. There's a story. They lived. But when we lose the objects, in a fire or whatever it might be, a refugee loses everything, and war, displacement, famine, a divorce sometimes can be that way. Those things have to live in us. The object is no longer there, so the story is inside of us now, And so it's interesting what you said to me about Carolyn, not having children. And so, in a way, she's living. You're helping carry on like her life, really. I know it seems like it's it probably could be oversimplified by saying, we're just carrying it on. But I mean, there's just something really momentous about that idea.
It's way more in depth than that. I mean, that's literally what I'm doing,
Yeah.
Because if there's not someone that is carrying on her legacy, it'll die out. And, her books will stay in libraries, and people will remember her. They'll see her signature in books or something. But if we're not living, I don't know how to put it into words, if I'm not carrying on that legacy, or if whoever comes after me stops, I mean,
it is, gosh, can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
And I've never really told this story publicly. A few people know it, but it's about what you're talking about, and I think it's a great example of what you just said. Years ago, I was, it was in the 90s. I was probably my son's age, not too much older than him. I was in my 20s. And I went through sort of, in hindsight, it was like a depression. I got super depressed at a young age. But I didn't know what was going on. Mental health was not on the horizon. People didn't talk about it. But I went up to Natchitoches, to the old cemetery there. And I walked up on this headstone. And, they all have epitaphs, and they got some really old headstones in there. And there was this little, epitaph on there. And it helped me. It was beautiful. It touched me. It really kind of operated as sort of like a salve, just like almost like a little thing that I'm so glad I came upon it, because I remembered it. I was like, wow, I'm going to remember this the rest of my life, because it was a part of kind of flipping a switch in my head to get me off of that negativity I was stuck on. And so every year, for years, I would go back, and I'd always make a stop. I'd always go to that particular grave. I really never paid attention to whose grave it was. I would always go and I'd touch it, And as the years went by, 30 years later, it's gotten more and more worn. It was already old back then. But I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago, it never occurred to me to like, because when I read it, the internet didn't exist. Never occurred to me to look it up. Like, what is this thing that touched my life in such a way? Like, where did it come from? And so I typed the words in exactly as they were on the headstone, and I found this one obscure thing that pops up. It was a Google archive that an old library of old publications that someone had scanned. You know, they have these archives that you can print now. And it had it highlighted, and I said, oh, that's it for sure. It was word for word, but it was a part of a long poem, and I didn't even know it existed. And it was just shoved away in this obscure old publication from the 1800s. And when I printed it out, I mean, I just wept and wept, because the whole poem was like everything it was everything that I was feeling at that time, and everything that little piece had come to mean to me. And I felt like I had found like it's this treasure. And I was like, I can't believe my whole life, you know, my whole adult life anyway, this little tiny phrase written by somebody that was printed and published, that I found randomly on a headstone, has been just tucked away in some random archive somewhere, never to be seen again. And now every time someone passes away, it's like I print that thing out and give it to them, because it's such a comfort, you know. And it just makes me think about what you're saying about Carolyn's works. Like, it could just disappear into obscurity, like that poem that's just a huge treasure, full of like healing and wonder. And you have this opportunity to not let that happen to Carolyn's life's work. And that's a wonderful thing. It's just a big mission. It's so huge when you really think about it.
Yeah, it is a lot, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Like, people have dream jobs, and they may get to do that one day. Being the curator of Briarwood was never once crossed my mind as I wanted to be the next Clarice Starling.
Oh,
I want to go the
criminal justice. Yeah, right.
But this, I feel like I was called to be here.
Your brand deserves the best. At Parker Brand Creative Services, we build better brands with creative precision. From graphic design to digital marketing, we think sideways, push forward, and get your brand up. Trust the work, not the pitch. View our extensive galleries at parkerbrandup.com.
Well, you said something earlier too, that thing about wanting to stay in the zip code. I love that idea, because it's so easy to just chase dreams all over the place and just get pulled in every direction and go, oh, I got to go over here to this big place, or I got to move off to find my mission, or to be somebody I have to do XYZ or make this connection. And what you're saying is the idea that we can do amazing things and find meaning and purpose, like right where we are, where our roots are at. And you've chosen to do that, and it's obviously proof positive that is the way to be. I mean, I look at the life that you're living and the mission you're on, and I'm like, wow, you're right. It obviously provides a fulfillment that's so missing from chasing all the time.
Yeah, I never wanted to live anywhere where I could hear traffic. That's just
you can't hear traffic
like
out
a
here.
nightmare to me.
Well, let me ask you this: what's changed since you've taken on this role? You know, what were you doing that's maybe different?
When I got to Briarwood and I started seeing like snakes and skinks and frogs.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I'd see the occasional rat snake or king snake, but when I got here, started seeing all these different snakes that I'd never seen before. I didn't know how to identify them, so I had to force myself to learn. But then I was looking back at like previous events that had been at Briarwood, and I knew if I wanted to leave my impression on this place, I wanted to do something that represented all aspects of nature and not just plants or birds.
Sure.
Like, I wanted to get people out here to look at mushrooms and snakes and turtles and salamanders, and that has brought a whole new realm of people to Briarwood of all ages. Our friends at Louisiana Snake ID, they're out of
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Spoka?
They have a pretty decent social media presence. Actually, they helped me one time because my wife stepped on a snake and said, "There's a snake outside." She took a picture, and I was like, "I have no idea what this is," and they identified it pretty quick. I mean,
Oh yeah, Kevin is super fast. We met Kevin and Rachel. We hadn't even been here 6 months, but I had joined some group on Facebook for snake identification, and I got in contact with Kevin, and I was like, "Why don't you come out here one day and
Oh, wow.
I mean, look at all these snakes we have. I mean, it's just a big forest with a lot of creeks and ponds. Like, there's a lot of snakes out here if you're looking for them." And they came out, and we've had them back out quite a few times. They'll be here in August for the
Bio Bash?
For the Bio
Oh,
Bash.
okay, great.
They've ended up becoming some of our best friends.
That's cool.
And we also have had the Louisiana Amphibian and Reptile Enthusiasts. So they go out and look for reptiles and amphibians. They've introduced me to some frogs or salamanders that I didn't know existed. I had no idea. And then we also had the Northeast and Northwest master naturalists out here. And one of our friends up near Monroe, Charles Paxton, he has this thing that you plug into your phone that identifies bats.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what it's called, but I think it can identify them by like the frequency of
Really?
their sound, something like that.
That's interesting.
And they were out in the meadow one evening, and they identified quite a few different bats.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, well, I thought a bat was a bat.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were like,
Just two.
yeah, there were 7 different species they identified. So I've brought this whole new realm of people out to Briarwood. And right now I'm working on getting more, like, school groups out. Like, there's always been field trips out here, but I've had a lot of homeschool groups since I got here. But just introducing these unique things to kids that are in schools in the city or something that they can't go out to the woods every day.
Right.
And seeing, like, the excitement on their face, that just motivates me so much.
You know, it is a sad thing. My youngest son and I talk about this. I grew up way outside the city limits in Southwest Louisiana. And my parents had a couple of acres, and it was wooded. So I spent most of my childhood roaming those woods, you know, and when you do that, you learn it like it's the back of your hand. When people say that, that's a real thing. Like, you just can walk through those woods and know exactly where you're at. But since moving away from there, I haven't lived in an area like that since. I've always lived in town or sort of close to the edges of town. And so just being able to randomly get up in the morning and go walk in the woods and feel safe, that's missing from my kids' lives, you know. And my youngest son said that one day. He goes, I hate that I can't go just walk in the woods. I'm like, I know. And I hated the tone in his voice, because I was like, he's not wrong. Like, I get what he's feeling. There is an itch when you're stuck inside all the time or in a town all the time. Yeah, you can go to a state park and hike the trail, but once you've done it a few times, it's like you just want some diversity. You just want, and traveling to find it is expensive, and it's, you know, then there's the, I hate to say, the environmental impact of having to travel all the time too, you know. So coming out here, I can see that being a huge benefit to kids that maybe are kind of locked into those environments like we are.
And when Caroline willed this land out to the public, she wanted it to become a place for students to come and observe and learn. She wanted it to be like an educational playground, pretty much. And that's what I try to strive for, and have as many groups as possible.
Yeah.
Because, and for anyone that's interested, I can plan lessons for the kids. Like, we can do an activity, not just a tour. We can look under microscopes. We can do all
cool.
kinds of stuff. Yeah. And the thing that kids like the most when they come out here is our carnivorous pitcher plants.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, they just lose it.
I've seen those, just pictures of them, but I yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. They like.
Y'all have a lot of those out here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have. I can't remember how many species there are that we have. I've been working with a carnivorous plant expert to try and get them all identified. But they also hybridize amongst themselves. So
Okay.
we have some hybrids that we can't identify.
I got you. So do y'all, now you said earlier, and I've seen this online before, that y'all do a plant sale every year. Do y'all do that multiple times a year or just once a year?
We do it twice a year as of right now. We have one at our annual spring picnic in April. We normally announce the date around the first of the year. That's our largest fundraiser of the year. We have live music, plant sale.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Lunch.
And it's out here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we have tours. You can hike that day.
Now, and if I'm remembering correctly, at least, I might not be, but I remember thinking it was pretty cool because y'all would put the plants online for people to...
Yeah, I think in 2020 they did the plant sale online.
Oh, okay, that might be
And
what
then
I'm remembering.
But last fall, we also have a plant sale the first Saturday every November. Last fall we had a Louisiana iris sale, and we had them on sale for about a month. And I would ship them to different states.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we'll do that this year or not, but this year, each year for the picnic we have a different theme. And this year and like last fall, up until the end of this year, is Year of the Iris. Because we our biggest project right now is restoring the Bay Garden. So our Bay Garden restoration project kicked off last September, and we spent a few months going through all the beds. There's 30 beds, and in each bed there could be 5 or 6 different hybrids of Louisiana irises. So we have to make sure that, and when those little spaces, that if we dig up a rhizome, we put it right back.
Oh, really? Okay.
It is extremely important because there are 5 species of Louisiana irises, and they can all hybridize amongst themselves. So you could have a purple Gigantocerula iris and a yellow, or let's say a red fulva. One's really tall, one's really short. They can hybridize and make a medium height pink iris.
Wow, that's
so
something.
Caroline and a few other people from South Louisiana figured this out in, I don't know, the 30s or late 20s. So they started bringing home Louisiana irises, these original species from different swamps and stuff in South Louisiana, and playing around with them and creating all these different colors, shapes, and sizes.
Okay. I'm going to have to ask you a question because I'm ignorant about this. I mean, I have things planted in my house, and I like to think I know something, but I guess I've never really experimented with or understood hybridization. How exactly does that work? I mean, do you just plant them by each other and they just... I guess I don't really know the science behind that.
Yeah, so...
That's pretty fascinating.
I don't know all the... I'm not a botanist or a scientist. I don't know all the formal terminology. Okay. All I know is that if a bee goes to one iris and then it lands in another, that iris it landed in and pollinated will have a seed pod of this new iris.
Interesting. And it has some of the characteristics then with
of the mother and father. These two different.
So it
irises.
is very similar. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand how that worked. So it's pollen being transferred from one to the other.
Yeah. So in our Bay Garden, anytime an iris blooms, we have to cut the seeds off because we don't want these random irises popping up, because if we have all these new hybrids showing up, that they might take over and kill out the original hybrids that date back to when Caroline Dormon lived here.
I see.
So
that's interesting. So that's a lot of
it's a lot of
cultivation and work. Yeah.
But we'll kick off that project again this year on September 7th. We call as many volunteers as possible because it is a lot of work. Last year, I think on the kickoff day we had 10, 15. Is
that a multi-day thing, an all-day thing?
That was just one day, but then we opened up every weekend if people wanted to come out, and we didn't. We have, I have 2 part-time workers, and then we have some volunteers that would dedicate their life to Briarwood if they
Mm-hmm.
could. That came out, but other than that, it's really, it was pretty difficult to get people because it is hard work.
Sure.
It's because you're on the ground digging up irises and replanting them.
Yeah. It's funny to hear when you said that, I immediately thought, God, the rewards of hard work. There are times, I mean, I work in advertising and marketing. So, I mean, a lot of my day is spent with digital content and a computer. And when not that I want to, it's so hot. Nobody wants to be outside working in the heat. But when I actually get, like we recently had to cut some trees down and I was so excited. I told my wife, I said, gosh, I get to chop wood and the things that, there's something about like hard work that's good for you. It just like unplugs you from all this stuff that's just so consuming of our attention and thoughts, and you just get to engage your body. You feel yourself breathe. There's something about feeling tired from hard work that's different than other tasks that can just, it's not as, it's stressful on your body, but it's almost not stressful on your mind. And I think the mind stress can be just more deadly. And it doesn't sound like there's any lack of hard work to do around here. So it's probably super good for you in a way. It's not that it's hard, but is it like hard? What's harder though, to get eat up with the modern stresses of just, what am I doing next and what's happening next versus, you know, okay, I got a task to do. I got to engage my body and do this hard work. So what I'm saying is if you want to volunteer to come work hard out here, it's probably good for you.
Yeah. and you get to see the accomplishments you've made.
Yes.
Like next year when the irises bloom, if you come out this fall and replant some irises and then you come back to see them in the spring when they're blooming, that'll make you feel so good.
There is a joy in that, isn't there? You're making me think about just our things at home. Most of the things we have are not things that we bought. It's something that we pinched from somewhere, or someone gave me a cutting, or, you know, I found an old property that was abandoned with something and I'm like, hey, can I dig this up? And they're like, yeah, sure. I used to ride my bicycle and I had these big baskets all over me full of just stuff people would give me. And someone came the other day and said, oh, your stuff's looking so good. I said, I didn't do anything, you know, and like, and I didn't mean it like I didn't really do anything, but I'm like, this is all just from, it's doing it on its own now. Like this is the waves of things coming and going and spreading all on their own now. And I don't have to sit here and go plant something new. And I've kind of learned, for me, I prefer the things that do it on their own because I'm forcing something if I'm planning. And I see that a lot with like landscaping and stuff where I feel like it's being forced upon the property and it's like, well, it's going to die and they're going to throw it away and you redo it. I prefer the things that a lot of people think are weeds. We were talking about that. I like those things because they're doing it on their own. They're spreading on their own. The bees love it. I can always tell things are good because I got lots of dragonflies, lots of bees, lots of salamanders and skinks and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I think for me, it feels healthier when I see all that. It's like a little universe for them, you know?
Exactly. And we haven't really touched on this, but sometimes people their idea of what Briarwood is when they think nature preserve, they may come here and see a lot of clean and cut gardens. The Bay Garden is the only one that we keep manicured, and it's not manicured throughout the year. It's just the irises have to be, you know, we don't want things living amongst the irises. Which if you looked out there right now, you would think we've never touched it before. But it's just that time of year. And but we try to keep things as natural as possible. You know, we remove things if they might be a danger to someone or they're overgrown, but other than that, it's just as natural as it gets, other than what Caroline Dormon planted.
Well, I noticed that when we drove in, you know, we stopped and paused at the visitor center, and I could tell immediately, it's like, oh, I love this because it's not like Hodges Gardens used to be, where it was just sort of like things, you know, planted, and it was all sort of rows of this and rows of that, which is very pretty. Not you know, belittling that, but
Did you know that Caroline Dormon helped with the landscaping at home?
no, I didn't know that. Well, there you go. And boy, speaking of Hodges Gardens, I mean, I've talked about it a few times on the show. I do kind of miss being able to go there. That was a trip I used to love to take, and my kids don't get to experience that. So that's kind of unfortunate. I always enjoy going out there. But, you know, I did not know Carolyn had anything to do with that.
Yeah. And there's was it the Huey P. Long Hospital? This is probably completely wrong, but there's a hospital, I think maybe in Pineville, she did the landscaping for. I have a picture of it, but I can't remember where it was. I know it's the Huey P. Long Hospital. It's been shut down now. She did landscaping there. She also worked to create the Highway Beautification Department for Louisiana.
Didn't know that either.
Yeah. I'm telling you, she did so much.
Yeah.
I didn't mention that she was also a painter.
Yeah.
These watercolors are her.
Oh, the watercolors in your home.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, I didn't notice. I did until I saw them, and they're irises. Okay, those are irises, correct?
Yeah. Caroline spent a lot of time down at Melrose. She spent a lot of time with Clementine Hunter.
Okay.
Traded paints with her and things, so they were good friends.
I love hearing all this. I read this wonderful book called Fluke recently, and it's all about that. Little things that you just have no idea. They seem so small and nobody knows about them, but it like changed, like a huge hinge moment where everything just shifted for something. And I love hearing that she was involved in all these little ways and little things. And it's like, yeah, well, what if she hadn't have been?
Yeah.
Would it have actually happened? You know.
I mean, if she didn't ask the wives of senators and congressmen, whatever, to lunch to try and convince their wives to get a meeting with her, we might not have Kisatchie.
Right. I like that. She knew where she needed to exert the influence in the proper way. That's a high intelligence.
Yeah, and she would, when she was learning how to weave baskets, when she would go speak to her garden clubs, she would bring baskets and show it off. And then, people would want to buy them from the Native Americans. So she was really instrumental in keeping the basketry alive.
At Parker Brand Creative Services, we work diligently to build better brands. From award-winning graphic design to media placement, we deliver results that speak for themselves. Are you ready to elevate your brand? Visit parkerbrandup.com today.
So let me ask you something. BioBash is coming up, and we're coming to that. That's the first time y'all have done this, correct? So what's your vision of this? What's this going to be like?
So when I was thinking of this event, I wanted to have an event that hit all aspects of nature. I wanted something with birds. I wanted something with mushrooms, edible plants, moths, butterflies, reptiles, everything. So I talked with some of our great friends that we've met since we've been here. And on the first night, we have edible mushrooms, where Chris Richmond, who's from Leesville, will come and teach us how to cultivate or identify mushrooms. And then on Saturday, that evening, we'll also do something called sheeting, which we're going to set up black lights and white sheets at night to look at moths.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And Miss Linda Ald, the NOLA bug lady, will be doing that Friday night. She is really important in monarch repopulation and monarch gardening across Louisiana. And she'll be presenting Saturday about what plants you should plant for what pollinators. So she's going to teach us about host plants. And then John Dillon, who is a past president of the Louisiana Ornithological Society, will teach us how to identify birds. And then Dr. Charles Allen of Allen Acres Bed and Breakfast out of Pitkin will be doing a workshop on edible plants. So we'll be talking about plants you can find in your yard that are edible or medicinal. And then there'll be a plant sale also that day. Almost Eden. They're close to the Ritter Pitkin area. They'll be selling their plants. It's actually Dr. Allen's son-in-law and daughter that run that business. And then my friend John Michael Kelly with the United States Forest Service, his workshop or his presentation is about plants that Caroline brought to Briarwood, why she planted them where she did, and also about old growth forest. And then I think that's it for Saturday. I'll feel really bad if I'm forgetting something. And then Sunday, it's a Louisiana Snake ID. So they go around the state doing library shows, and they bring their pet snakes, and they teach you about the myths of snakes and all sorts of stuff. And then you get to see hold their pet snakes. So that'll be really cool.
Yeah.
But also Saturday night, we'll do the sheeting again, or black lighting. Everyone calls it something different.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That sounds really cool.
At Allen Acres in Pitkin, they do it, I think, every night.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And they have a website. They have a bed and breakfast. You can go stay and get a tour from Dr. Allen.
That's, it's one of the things I've liked about the iNaturalist app. It really, sometimes I can look at social media and technology. I get a little bit, like I don't want to consume so much of that stuff. But then you get a tool like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow, okay, now this is cool. Because we have a local park back home. And I love to go throughout the seasons. And I literally belly crawl, when they don't cut it. Because they'll go months without cutting it at certain times of year, and it gets really grown up. And I think it's easy to go, I need to cut the grass. I love it when it's like that, because I can go out there, and I've discovered so many things. One time there was this pink flower out there, and I was like, is it a flower? What am I seeing? And I kind of crawled down there, and I took a picture of it, and it was rice. It was Japanese, some kind of special rice. I don't remember the name, but I was like, this is rice. How did this get here?
Yeah.
And you're looking on there and it shows you how things migrate. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't something, it's showing up on other people who are using the app too, but it's not something that, just in the middle of the grass.
You brought up something that I completely forgot to mention. The whole weekend, Friday evening, when people get here, we'll open our Bio Blitz, and that's through iNaturalist. And it's a challenge. Like, we'll start at like 3 p.m. Friday and end at noon on Sunday. And whoever gets the most observations throughout the weekend, they'll get a prize.
Oh, that's cool.
We did that, a Bio Blitz, at our picnic last year, and the winner received a lifetime friendship through Briarwood. So it's always a good prize.
Well, that's cool.
And if they came just Saturday and took observations all day and they weren't there Sunday, they could still win. Looking around
here, honestly, there's no shortage.
No.
I mean, you could spend just in your front yard, probably spend all day identifying different species of plants and animals, bugs. I mean, it's such a great app for just so many things. Yeah. I feel like I've learned a lot with it. I feel like I was walking around. It's easy to just go, oh, that's neat, and just walk on by, but you actually have that opportunity to go, oh, what is this I'm seeing, and learn about it.
And you can upload sounds to iNaturalist too.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've uploaded sounds, like I've taken it in the evenings of bugs, and I can identify it.
Oh, wow. Okay. No, I didn't realize it had that capability. Yeah, I find that it's a good community too. If you misidentify something, or if they're like, well, it might not be that. But I also like that it's like, once you do identify something, it'll say, well, it gives you options of other people in your area. So it's likely what you're seeing, which I think that helps me. Because sometimes I've looked at something and go, oh, it's this. And I'm like, well, that's a little exotic. It's probably not that. Let me see. And it's like, no, it's probably this. There's 12 other people saw this. You're just misidentifying it. So I'm excited to come up for that event. Y'all planning on doing that if it's a success, like doing this more than once a year or a couple every year? Maybe?
Yeah, I'd hope to do this every year. And we're doing it in August. And Travis always thinks I'm lying when I say this, but it's his birthday gift this year.
Oh.
So his birthday is August 3rd.
Okay.
And I wanted to have, because we can't go on vacation or anything, but I wanted a weekend where he's with the coolest people possible in Louisiana, learning about mushrooms, looking for snakes, whatever. But he doesn't believe me. So now I'm saying this publicly.
That is pretty cool, actually. What a good gift. I mean, look, here's the thing. Experience is such a good gift. I mean, and being around good people is a good gift. I can tend to get caught up in work and get isolated and on projects a lot. And so, and this show is as much for me as it is for everybody else, because I'm treating myself to meeting good people and going to see what their lives are like. And that is a reward. There's something special about making those connections.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic. I appreciate y'all opening up your time to us today in your home and just telling us about what's going on. I feel like I have a better understanding, but also it makes me eager to scratch a little more even, and ask questions. I'm sure that later I will think of and go, well, maybe I can go research that. You know?
I could sit here all day talking about Briarwood or Caroline Dormon.
Well, I mean, it's a rich history, and that's a rich future too. I mean, and rich not what I mean by rich is that just diverse and full of life. You look around just driving into the place, it's a feeling of the other thing too, and not just a feeling of like full of life, but I don't know if it's just the way I'm wired, but I felt history just as soon as we turned the corner and I saw the mailbox and the sign. I got out of the truck and just kind of framed up a photo, which sometimes that helps me get myself in the right mindset and like, okay, this is history. I'm in a historic place. How many people have come through here before, and what were their intentions, and who's worked here, who's come and gone. I just think you can feel it here.
And I'm happy, I know it.
Hi there, Good News listeners. It's time for Fishing for Goodies, where I take a back seat and let the Good News Fishbowl lead the way. Find the Good News podcast as a personal labor of love using the professional skills and resources of Parker Brand Creative Services. When you share our podcast, you're helping our brand, ParkerBrandUp.com, reach potential clients. When we're building brands, that helps keep the Good News signal strong. So listen, enjoy, learn, like, and share the good news. Now, let's fish out some good questions for my guests.
What we ask the guests to do is draw 3, and you can either answer all 3 of them and we can talk about them, or you can just pick one and we can talk about that one. It's really up to you.
Do you want to do some? Sure. Okay. How about I do one and then you do the other 2? Is that okay?
No, that sounds fine. Yeah, totally fine.
Old industries that can be disrupted.
So that would be something that you think that an old industry that maybe we're still stuck with. Boy, this is getting into your territory, actually.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Like an old industry that you're like, okay, we need to change this. Maybe something about sustainability or anything that even affects this property and your job. Is there like an industry that you're like, this could probably change. We could do this better.
Okay. I'd like to talk about nurseries and the horticulture world. There are nurseries that I've seen sell plants that are extremely invasive. And what I mean by invasive is they don't belong here. And also, they repopulate at a horrible speed. Now, Caroline planted a lot of things here that were not native, but they weren't invasive. Like camellias or Formosa azaleas. They're not invasive. But I see nurseries selling things like the yellow flag iris.
Yellow flag iris, okay.
And I probably won't be able to pronounce this right, but the Latin name is Iris pseudocrus.
Okay.
But it's a yellow flag iris, and I see people like in the springtime or in the fall getting rid of bulbs or rhizomes, and they're like, does anyone want some purple and yellow flag irises? And these nurseries are selling these yellow flag irises as Louisiana irises. And the bad thing about the yellow flag Iris pseudocrus, is it's not native to the United States, and it hybridizes with Louisiana irises.
Oh.
So it takes over and kills them.
Okay.
So if you have a wonderful patch of Louisiana irises, and then you plant some yellow ones because you want purple and gold for, LSU, you're going to end up with just yellow in a few years.
Gosh, I never even thought of that. I see purple and gold irises back home. That's got to be why the LSU thing. I never even occurred to me.
But there are Louisiana irises hybrids, and sometimes you might find an iris fulva that is yellow, but it's not as common to come across those yellow Louisiana iris hybrids. So these nurseries just don't care, and they're selling yellow flag irises because they know they'll make money off of them. But since I can't like show a picture of them, the way you can tell the difference of Louisiana irises versus an invasive iris is the yellow flag has this midrib down the middle of the leaf that sticks out. You'll feel it. A Louisiana iris is completely smooth.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way to tell.
Is that really the big thing that you can tell? You can tell them apart. They look similar though, for all intents and purposes.
But if you feel the leaf, you'll be able to feel that midrib. And if it's not smooth, probably a yellow flag.
Very interesting.
Or a different, like bearded irises, you can feel the midrib a little bit, but it doesn't stick out like the yellow flag.
And you really, I mean, you're right, a consumer wouldn't know, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, how
especially
would they?
They want to trust the nursery, but they're saying it's a Louisiana iris when it's the furthest thing from a Louisiana iris.
Interesting stuff. That's something. Well, see, and that's a piece of useful information.
Mm-hmm. And then
I like that.
The yellow flag iris is actually banned in a few states. It's not banned in Louisiana yet.
Where did it come from? You said it wasn't native to the United States.
I can't remember.
Okay. I was just curious because, I mean, who knows?
Asia, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't care. It just needs to go back where it came from.
So many things are like that. I mean, that's like the Chinese tallberry tree, you know? I mean, you know, back down home there, the pastures along the fences, those guys are just constantly dealing with those. I mean, I think it's a pretty tree in isolation. I mean, you know, but if those little pods open up, and I mean, they'll. And
that reminded me, another thing, mimosa trees. These little pink flowers that everyone loved. That I had one in my yard when I was a kid, and I loved it. That is horribly invasive, also. And some people will argue, but it is. But the argument I always hear is that, well, it's not invasive in my yard. Well, that doesn't mean a bird's not carrying the seed 20 miles away.
Yeah.
Because there's no mimosa trees that are seed producing on this property, but there's a seedling, you know, by the visitor center.
Where is, I don't know. There's a ton of them back home, and I see them along the roadsides all the time, and they are pretty. I mean, they get really large. I didn't realize how big they got, but I guess where does that come from? Is it not native? I don't know.
No, it's not native.
Okay. I didn't know where it came from.
I can't tell you where it came from either.
We have a business back home, a local business that uses that pink bloom or whatever that is, the pod, the seed flowering, however it is, as its logo. I never realized, and I guess I'm going to be honest, I thought because of that, it's like, oh, they must have named it after that because it's local and it's a local business, so they chose a local, but it's not.
No, it's one of those trees that people love because they grew up around them, you know, like my grandmother had one in her yard, so now I have to have one.
Sure.
Kind of like that. But people just focus on their yard and not really what they're doing to land around. And it's not. Yeah. I mean, you do what you want. I'm not going to go to your house and tell you need to cut down this tree.
No, but you do see neighbors with contention like that. I've heard neighbors say, like, I hate that they got this kind of tree or whatever because it drops. I know it makes me think of from when I was a kid. Gosh, if I ate one pear, I ate 1,000 at my grandma's house. I mean, pears all the time when it was time for pears. And I can remember the pears just stopped, and it was because that tree was not my grandmother's tree. Her neighbor's pear tree was growing over in her yard, and it was huge. As a kid, I was like, oh, there's the pear, her pears. But it was his tree. It had limbs in her yard. It would just drop pears, and so she would eat them, and we all ate them. And when they cut that tree down, I can remember like the contention about it because she was like, yeah, I mean, it's your tree, but like we've lived with the tree and the pear, you know, it was like a thing.
Our tree now.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Plants can be like that, you know, especially with trees. Like somebody has a fig tree or something growing over a fence or one, you know, and some people love them. Like I have a mulberry tree cutting that I got from a park that I walk at, and I babysat that thing, trying to root it for years, and it's finally like a tall, you know, I say tall, I mean, it's like 4 or 5 feet tall. And so I planted it in my front yard because I want the berries and the birds. But there are people who are like, you don't want that mulberry tree. We're going to have birds. I'm like, yeah, but we want them. But now I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm like, well, yeah, but those birds could carry those seeds and drop those little.
But mulberry is native. It belongs here.
True.
It's supposed to be here. And I've argued with people about the American beauty berry on some Facebook group, and I should just stay off of them because I will argue all day long. But
I love it.
Like I said, I'm not going to tell anyone what they can or can't do. I have no authority over anyone. What I can do is tell them why they shouldn't. But they still argue with me. I'm giving them the facts.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hey, there's a lot of worse things people argue about on social media.
That's right.
For sure. Well, I love this. This is great. This is what the fishbowl is good for. It just gets you into places you weren't going to go. I love it. So the next question, your husband Travis is going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, before you grab your question, you haven't been on the podcast yet, but you've been here the whole time, so you're going to have to introduce yourself.
Okay. My name's Travis Brossette, and I'm Bayli's husband, and I'm more or less the groundskeeper here.
Okay. All right. We talked before the podcast, so we got to get to know each other a little bit. So what's it like being a groundskeeper?
It's a labor of love.
Yeah.
I sweat and I bleed. We both do here. But, to look back on the work that we've done, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love it.
Well, and we talked about hard work earlier, and I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah.
So you were agreeing with some of that, something about labor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sentiment I can always get behind. I love hard work and physical labor. Maybe not always in the moment, but definitely looking back.
Well, I appreciate the work y'all are doing out here, and I also just want to tell you too, appreciate you inviting us into your home. This has been great so far.
We're glad to have y'all.
This is great. Big smiles all around today. I love it. So now it's your turn to dive in the fishbowl.
Okay, let's see what we got. Would you rather question, go deep sea diving or go bungee jumping? I guess for me personally, I got a huge fear of heights. I've come a long way in recent years with my fear of heights, but I love the ocean. I'm also kind of scared of the ocean, but I do love being in the water, and I love the sea creatures. You probably don't see a lot of creatures bungee jumping at the rate of speed you travel.
So Travis, I got to tell you, I'm sitting here going, I could just jump right in right here because I agree with both of those things. I have no interest in bungee jumping at all. Jumping off of something just feels unnatural to me. And I too have I didn't know I had a sense of fear of heights. Mm-hmm. I actually think back and I'm like, I don't think I always had it. I actually think it showed up when I had kids. And I think it was just a fear of dying early. I know that sounds like crazy, but I really think it showed up when they were born. Because I think back to, or just dumb and young. I would climb things when I was a kid, didn't feel anything. I mean, my memories are good of climbing high things or being on top of high things. Some point, I started getting this weird quiver and a shake when I would go up high. Like I would climb a ladder too high, and I was like, what? I climb a tree too high. And I'd get this feeling in my body. I used to tell a buddy of mine, I said, I don't know how to describe it, except I have this weird fear that there's this, oh God, what's the right word? I guess saboteur. I don't know. It's probably the right word. There's a secret saboteur in my brain that is going to throw me off. Like I'm going to hold on to the ladder. I want to climb the ladder. But when I get up here, there's like a secret part of me that's just going to not hold on tight enough or slip, and I'm going to fall. And I just had this weird mechanism that kicked in.
Yeah.
And I know that's a silly way to describe it, but like, it was like a weird, okay, I'm cool. No, I'm not. Yeah. Because I could just drop off right now. I don't know what happened, but something flipped.
Yeah.
So bungee jumping, tall buildings. I don't really even love airplanes, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Likewise.
But the ocean also more fascination because of the creatures. But I also have a fear of like the vast ocean. Like when I see ships in waves and like stuff like that kind of freaks me out.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want no part of that.
Yeah. Just the abyss and looking down into that deep darkness it makes you feel small.
Yeah. So, okay. That's an interesting, to kind of segue to this property a little bit. Have you ever had a similar feeling in the woods?
Yeah, I guess I have. And I think I've gotten better over time. But I think, especially when I was a child, I had a lot of irrational fears of the woods and the darkness and being alone.
Yeah.
And then I think as I got older and became an adult, I realized, especially in Louisiana, there's probably not a lot of creatures in the woods that are more scary than man.
That's a good point.
And I don't often I'm not often scared of being in the woods alone.
Yeah.
I enjoy my time in the woods alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would agree too. And that's been my experience for the most part. But every rare once in a while, I would allow myself to get a little unnerved by feeling like I've went too far away from my resources. I tend to, everyone that knows me would probably say that I am that way. I pack a lot. I overthink. I'm like, well, I need to make sure I got my first aid kit, which that's a good practice.
Yeah, definitely.
I got my first aid kit. I got my water. Yeah, but what if this scenario? Okay, I might need that. Make sure I got a rain poncho. Okay, and then before long, I pick my pack up and I'm like, this is too heavy. And I have to go back through it again and got to shuck some stuff because I think there is like something in the back of my head telling me that that feeling of I've got too far away from my primary resources. I need to. I don't know what that is, but I don't know if it's just being cautious or overcautious. The woods can do that.
Yeah, I can directly relate. In 2018, I went and did some world travel, and I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew I wanted to bring a lot of stuff so I could be prepared for any situation. And like probably a lot of amateurs do, I overpacked, and I learned really quick and fast that was too much for what I was doing. And it's not always about what you have with you, but what you're capable of
Guys,
doing.
man, I'm with you. Somebody told me they were like, and it's a common saying, I think, with outdoor skills. They'll say, the more you know, the less you pack.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's good. But I still am like, I don't know if obsessed is the right word. I get paranoid about not having redundancies. Like, like somebody said, it's not packing 2 lighters, it's having 2 different ways to make fire. I'm like, okay, that's something that's kind of helped me rethink the way I pack a little bit. It's like, well, maybe something has a dual purpose instead of, that fear of like, I better have a lighter here and one in my pocket. I better have one here and one, backup on the backup on the backup, that kind of thing. So, well, that's interesting, man. So we got some similar, I wonder how many, I bet if you sat down with, 100 people, I bet you could probably find a lot of people have similar.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Those similar things if they really sit down.
Yeah, I'll say I ran into a lot of people in my travels who were just like me. And it's just so common. Like if you're telling a group of people, they all just have a laugh at you at your expense because at the same time they've been there before and they've lived that experience.
Yeah. So while I got you, before we get to Bayli's third question here, what's it been like for you, this experience? I mean, this is 3 years into being curators of the property.
I think totally opposite experience for me than for Bayli. For her, she never wanted to leave this zip code. This has always been home for her. And for me, I'm a bit of a rambling man. And, I really have been all over the world. And I mean that literally. Spent all of 2018 gone from the country.
Oh, wow.
Never saw America.
Interesting.
That year. And I didn't know that I ever wanted to come back to Louisiana, especially. As a young child, I moved from Louisiana to Arkansas, spent 15 years there, and then just started living abroad and working all over the country. But coming back to Louisiana, I've always heard that you do come home, and I never thought that I would, but I did. And it's just so wild that I met Bayli in the fashion that I met her and ended up coming, sort of back home.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that makes me want to ask you, living abroad as much as you have, how good do you think that would be for everybody to see the world? Because so many people don't see more than their space.
Yeah, their state, their city. I encourage everybody to go. And I know that there's a lot of fears for a lot of people traveling abroad and going places. I just think that the rewards outweigh the risks. Sure, you hear these stories and nobody wants to end up a statistic. But for me, I just think that so rare that those bad things happen in the grand scheme of things. It's like go out and see the world and experience other cultures and foods and just meet people. It's just so great.
I think, not to get too far off in the weeds, but what you're saying makes me think of something that I try to live by, not always so good at it, but is that understanding is the end of fear. And I think we tend to fear each other. Mm-hmm. A lot of us do, especially now. It seems like there's a lot of that, like just fearing each other. And it's like, okay, maybe it's just because I don't know. I don't have all the information. I don't understand. And once I start to understand and get to know, then the fear goes away, because it's so easy to just look at anything outside of what we know as alien. And I think that's just a human thing. We seem to do that
definitely
over and over again. It causes us a lot of problems.
It definitely does. And we do have so much in common with people all across the world.
And that part. Yeah.
And even when you have these cultural differences and what's the word I'm looking for? Like language barriers.
Yeah.
Living in places like Korea. I didn't know Korean when I went to Korea, but I knew people who lived there and they were good people. And I think that just goodness in people breaks down all those barriers. I just think that that's something that you can find common ground with. And I think good recognizes good. And it's just so amazing to find that in people that you have so many differences with, but have that in common with.
Love that, brother. Love it. That's fantastic. Good recognizes good. So, Bayli, you ready to do your third question?
It says, do you think people, including yourself, live up to their full potential?
Oof. Super personal.
Ooh. I can't speak for other people, but I can speak for myself, and some people might feel the same way about themselves. I doubt myself a lot about a lot of the things that I can do. So I don't think that I'm living to my full potential yet. I have all these ideas in my brain that I know that I can accomplish, but I think that I have to do them right now.
Oh, yes.
Like, I'll have this, my to-do list since I got to Briarwood is never ending. Like, there's so many things I want to do, I want to make happen, but it's going to take me a lifetime to get to those. I think I do a pretty decent job, but there's so much that I'm capable of that I just don't do.
I understand that. Can I say something? Can I encourage you?
Yeah.
Okay. Just I keep a coin in my pocket, and and my son and I talk about this saying a lot because it gets me through. Because I go through that. I'm 50 years old, and I go through it still. Because it's easy to look around and see something in the same category you're working in and go, well, they're doing this. Why can't I do it? Why can't I reach that or whatever? And I can end up with this long list. We all have the lists. But I have this coin, and it's got Latin quotas, age quod agis, and it means do what you're doing. And I tell myself that all the time because I can so easily not do what I'm doing. I can think about what I should be doing or where I want to be, which is good to have goals, but I have to use that all the time to go back and go, okay, do what you're doing right now and do that thing to the potential you have at the moment, which is probably your full potential. Because even if you're distracted by something in your personal life or maybe even there's a financial restriction to what you can do, maybe you don't have the right tool or the right resource, well, that's what you can do right now. So that is your full potential. So do that right now at that potential, because that's what you're going to get. You don't have more money to do it. You don't have a better tool. This is all you can do. It is your full potential for that one thing. So somebody might say, well, that's just an easy way to tell yourself you're doing good enough. You should work harder. I just don't believe in the grind. I think the grind will eat you alive. And it's like, okay, no, I'm going to do the best with what I have and use what I have right now. So hearing you say that, I got to tell you, like I see a lot of accomplishment personally. I mean, anybody who can, like this bio bash coming up that we're going to come to, I think anybody who can take a legacy like what you're working with, create a new event, and people are signing up and they're going to be here and they're going to leave and probably come again. I'm like, wow, that's accomplishing a lot.
Yeah.
You know, you've changed lives immediately. There's not many people who can say any of that. Some people haven't done any of that, you know? So you probably do have that long list, but I would just say keep doing what you are doing when you're doing it and just keep going. You're at a high potential, in my opinion.
Yeah. I cut myself short a lot, you know, because I can't see myself from other people's perspective, you know.
Yeah.
So
I understand
that's
that.
like going back to what I said about when you asked what it's like being at Briarwood, and I said it's scary because that's my biggest fear is messing something up or not doing what I need to do.
Yeah. You know, we talk about fear a bunch in this episode, but is fear... I think we hear the word fear and it's like fear, it's related to being scared, it's scary. But fear can be kind of a positive sometimes.
Yeah.
Like it's like a like it makes you it creates that iron sometimes. It's like, okay, I'm afraid that I'm gonna mess this up. I have a legacy behind me. I'm gonna mess that up. Well, it's like, okay, but that fear kind of sharpens my edge because now it makes me want to be stronger.
Yeah.
You know? So,
yeah. When I say I'm scared, it's not like when people are scared of Silence of the Lambs. You know, it's not that fear. It's, you know, I would not consider myself a perfectionist, but I want to be perfect at everything Briarwood related.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and look, here's the thing. It's like looking out at the green cloud that I saw earlier. It's as various as that. I mean, you have all these different things that are, you have potential to succeed at. I mean, in every direction. There's so much here. I mean, how many acres?
12.
Wow. I mean, that's a massive piece of property to...
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, we keep things as natural as possible. So there's plenty of areas we don't even touch.
Yet to be discovered things and potential to be great at. So for people that are listening and they want to know more about Briarwood, they want to connect with Briarwood, what are the best ways right now that you can find for them?
Definitely social media.
Okay.
I've tried to be very active on Facebook. So if they want to learn more, they can, like what's going on currently, they can look at our social media. Our website has like basic history, tour information, event registration, all that good stuff. But I try to update on Facebook as much as I can, but they can always just call. I'm typically, I am the only person that answers the phone. So when you call, you're going to be talking to me. And if you had questions, sure, just call me. I might not answer immediately, but I'll call you back.
And that number's on the website? And what's the website address?
It's www.briarwoodnp.org.
briarwoodnp.org. Okay. Thank you so much for opening up y'all's lives to us today.
Anytime.
As well, I'm more thankful every moment that I found.
Thanks for listening to another Good News Conversation. If you'd like to learn more about my guests and their good works, visit findthegood.news or visit the links in the show notes. If you found something good in this episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave an honest review. These small actions help amplify the good news and help us reach far beyond the Louisiana Gulf Coast. I thank you for pressing play and for syncing up with this good news signal.